Welcome to the Perfect Pairing Podcast. Today we are smoking the Casa 1910 Cuchillo Parado in celebration of Cinco de Mayo.
But before we get to that, in case you guys don't know who we are, my name is Chris, and I am the whiskey expert and the cigar noob.
And I'm Adam, and I am the cigar expert and the whiskey noob.
And today we're finding the perfect pairing for this Cuchillo Parado. I can't say the full name with the brand. I'm sure I will mess it up. But pretty different from anything that I've smoked, so I'm excited to get into it.
Yes, absolutely. And I will let you guys know the reason that we're having this cigar specifically for the celebration of Cinco de Mayo, or I should say the week after, because, you can't just celebrate for one day. You got to keep going, right? So the reason we're having it today is because Casa 1910, their cigars are 100% Mexican puros. Now, when it comes to a puro, that means that 100% of the tobacco is from the same country. And in this instance, yes, it is Mexican tobacco. So this Casa 1910 Cuchillo Parado is 100% Mexican tobacco, and that's going to make this cigar very unique if you haven't had one of Casa 1910 cigars before, and something that, again, just like I think here in a couple weeks we'll hit, and we've hit before, you're going to see cigars that are drastically different from, your average cigar where you may be like, well, yeah, I'm sure I'm getting this earthy flavor, getting this tobacco flavor. You should see a very distinct difference between this cigar and another cigar, which leads me right into, in terms of flavors, the trivia question of the week, which is which part of the cigar. We went over the three parts of the cigar, the wrapper, binder, and filler. The wrapper being the outside, binder in the middle, filler obviously fills the inside of the cigar. But which of those three is the distinct part that gives you the majority of the flavor of your cigar? So that's the trivia question of the week. I know Chris knows the answer, but if you guys know the answer, make sure to pop it down in the comments, comment your answer, and stay tuned to the end of the episode where we will reveal the answer.
Yeah, and this might be a good one for the Discord. For those who have a lot of experience with cigars, just talking about whatever that answer is, whether you agree or disagree or what experiences you've had with it, because I know that some people dispute it, some people do not. I feel like the answer that Adam is about to give is pretty accurate from everything that I've had, but I know that there's a lot of creativity going on in the cigar world right now that just has made flavors totally change lately.
Yes, 100%. I will say there is definitely a asterisk next to this answer. There's creativity that you can do as a blender that can make things a little different and focuses on in different parts. But this is a majority of the cigars you smoke. This will solve that answer for you. But I am super pumped because we have a brand new flavor, I guess, profile that we're gonna have on this one today. Chris is holding it right now. A little tequila, baby. Let's go. I'm excited for this one.
I'm excited too, and I was just telling you before we started recording that I've really been starting to get into tequilas lately. My whiskey stuff, it's not going anywhere. Everybody knows I love whiskey, but tequila for me is like this new kind of just super different thing. So I've really been enjoying it, and so I'm really, really excited. This was the perfect timing for me to have a tequila episode, and it just so happened to land with Cinco de Mayo. So I can't wait to try this out. I can confidently say, I'm running through my head real quick. I can confidently say I've never had tequila with a cigar before, ever. Because I've barely gotten into drinking tequila neat, so I've never had it with a cigar.
What I will say, I'm sorry to all the whiskey lovers out there. Tequila is my number one drink. What I will say, what I'll caveat this with, we're having this Tequila Ocho Plata. That is their, silver, right? So it's a light spirit, obviously. Mm-hmm. I will say añejo is typically a better pairing and I'm about to eat my words here. I'm sure this is going to be delicious, but it's typically a better pairing with cigars that I've found. So, that darker tequila that you're looking at, if you don't know your tequila lingo. But that's what I would say is like, typically that's where I trend if I'm having a cigar and tequila, but I have done this pairing plenty of times, not with this specific tequila. Chris had this tequila, and I've actually never had it before, and I was like, this is my opportunity to get some more tequila. I'm going to take advantage of that. So I went and got some.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I've heard that people always recommend to me, because I'm a bourbon guy. They recommend me some añejos, maybe a reposado, which is just how long the tequila's been aged and how dark it's going to be from being in that barrel. This being silver has not been in a barrel, if I'm not mistaken, like at all. But it has, what I'm really excited about is it has wildly different flavors from a lot of the whiskeys that we've had on here. The metaphor that I have so far from my experience with tequila, especially for you bourbon drinkers listening, is bourbon is a bakery. It is bakery sweet. It is a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of caramel. Tequila is a candy store. It's not your chocolate and caramel type candy. It's your sour candies. It's your warheads. It's your gummy bears, that type of a candy. To me, it has way more of that fruit pop, that lighter sweet. And I've never had it with a cigar before, so I'm just going to stop talking and dive in.
I will say, just right off the bat, just going to this cigar, I've had this cigar plenty of times, more than I would probably like to admit. I am a huge fan of Casa 1910, everything they've done. This cigar specifically, I have had it a million times, but I haven't had it in probably about a month or two. Immediately, I did, admittedly, I had another cigar before today, but immediately I'm like, boom, like taken right back.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely different flavors than what you're typically going to get, guys. So when you break down this cigar, let me grab this. When you break down this cigar, this is a San Andreas Sumatra wrapper, San Andreas binder, and San Andreas filler. So if you are a fan of if you liked, if you're a part of the Perfect Pairing Club and you've been having the cigars with us and you had the West Tampa Red, that was a San Andreas wrapper. So you got some of that flavor in there. This is a similar wrapper. It's got that Sumatra, but it's San Andreas all the way through. So if you love the West Tampa Red, you're probably going to love this cigar, just like I do. I'm a huge fan of the West Tampa Red, and I'm a huge fan of these guys and this cigar specifically. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. That's why this is so different. You're looking at nearly San Andreas all the way through. It's got a little bit of a hybrid with that Sumatra there in the wrapper.
I can definitely vouch for that. I think even on the West Tampa Red episode, I mentioned that it's like one of my newer favorite cigars. Really big fan of it. Totally see that here. This is fantastic. This is right up my alley. It might be, there's something to it that's a little different, but when you put it with the tequila, this is the summer pairing right here. Maybe it's the weather influencing me. We're having a rare spot of sunlight in Ohio right now, but this is screaming summer at me. They're both light and sweet and kind of just airy. And yeah, no, I'm loving this so far.
Yes, I was just about to say this pairing is something that is extremely, what I want to say is extremely approachable. That is the words I would use 100%. Something that is not overwhelming on either end. Some people, if you're a little bit familiar with the cigar world, you may be, not a super fan of San Andreas. I will say, if you're a fan of San Andreas, you're going to love this cigar naturally. But if you're not, this cigar is a very approachable cigar on the San Andreas spectrum. A lot of San Andreas wrappers are San Andreas Maduro wrappers, so they've got a little bit more kick to it. This is a very pleasant, approachable cigar, and the tequila is exactly the same. If you're not a tequila guy, I can tell you this is a great sipping tequila to start with. It's a little on the pricier end. It's going to be in your high 40s, low 50s, depending on what state you're in. But it's still a very, very, very good beginner tequila. Again, this is my first time having it, and I love my tequila, so I know a little bit of what I'm talking about. I should have started this episode by saying I'm a cigar expert, whiskey noob, and a tequila, in the middle, somewhere in the middle. So, but this pairing, it's playing together. It's very light, very easy. What I can't nail down is if it's that complementary pairing where both are being elevated, if it's antagonistic where one is staying the same and one is changing, or if it's ultra where there's a brand new flavor coming out of nowhere, where it's the cigar and the tequila itself didn't produce that flavor. So that is what I'm struggling on right here.
So Thankfully, and if you guys haven't noticed, we've gotten really good at these monologues so that we're able to take turns and go back and forth quite a bit. And so thankfully I was able to go back and forth a few times. I think I've nailed down what I think this pairing is. I do want to jump off of what you said with two different things though. First of all, this San Andreas not being too harsh. I'm 100% with you there. Before we got on, I believe it was before we started recording, you had mentioned to me that San Andreases are usually more spicy and a little bit full body. And when I lit this up, I thought this is actually really approachable, a lot more than I thought it was going to be. But it still has a spice to it. So I would almost, for the whiskey drinkers, compare it to, this isn't a rye whiskey where it's super spice punch. It's like a high rye bourbon where it has the sweetness of the bourbon. It's kind of nice and mellow, but it has that little kick of rye to it. That's what it reminds me of. Now, I think this pairing is antagonistic in a really, really good way. I think the cigar is being elevated and just has this nice, bright, just summertime flavor. I'm talking like this pairing on my back patio on an 80-degree day. Maybe I got some lemonade next to it to stay hydrated. That's A1. So that's what's happening to the cigar. The tequila is being muted a little bit in the best kind of way. The kind of harshness, I've only had this tequila a couple other times because I just started making content on it, and it had more bite to it the first time that I had it. The cigar's mellowing it out nicely, so it's not necessarily bringing any flavors super elevated, but it's mellowing out the stuff that I don't like about it, so I notice more of the fruity sweetness from it. So I think it's a little bit antagonistic there.
I would say I think it's even stronger on the antagonistic side, and it may be my tequila brain. I think the cigar is definitely getting super mellowed. Like, think about that friend that you have that's just like, you're like, do you have any stress in life? Like, you know, we all have that one guy, one gal, whatever it is, that friend that just like, you know, you hang out with them and you're like, man, like, you make life seem so simple. Like, it's more complex than that. Like, why are you so chill all the time? That's exactly what it's doing to this cigar. Like, this cigar is just like, hey man, how you doing? Like, think life is so good. Like, you know, it's just that like just casual vibe. That's this cigar. And I think the tequila is, in my opinion, I think it's really remaining the same. If you're not a huge tequila guy, I could see where you're looking at it getting a little bit more mellowed, but it may just depend on your palate and what you're used to with tequila. Like for me, like it wasn't really that harsh in the beginning, or heavy, I should say, have any bite. For me, it was pretty smooth across the bow, but it could be, again, that acclimation of the palate, of just like my palate knows and loves tequila. So it's like, yep, this is it. Just keep it rolling. But overall, definitely a positive antagonistic pairing here. It is 100% good. Now comes the real quiz. I'm happy, I'm pumped that we found a good tequila pairing. But now comes the real quiz, this is going to be a huge 180 here with this next pairing.
Yes, this next pairing is going to be crazy. And I think you're right. I want to touch on the tequila. I think you're totally right about, I'm very new to tequila, so they all have kind of this bite to me that I'm not used to yet. Yeah. That could absolutely be it. Now, pairing number 2, let's dive in. We've got 3 pairings today, guys, that are wildly different, and I thought something's got to be phenomenal. Maybe something will be bad. We'll see. So pairing number 2 is Old Line American Single Malt Whiskey. It's Navy strength, meaning 114 proof. That would have been a good trivia question if I didn't just tell you it. And it's aged in virgin American oak. Why is that important? So this is a American single malt, meaning it's going to have similar flavors to a single malt Scotch. Not quite, but similar. But what makes this so different from a single malt Scotch is they age it in virgin American oak, and it's aged in the U.S. So in the U.S., it's a little bit warmer and a little bit colder, depending on your time of year. You get a lot more interaction with the oak, meaning this comes out a lot oakier than a single malt Scotch that you would have had. And it gives it a really weird flavor. I've had a couple American single malts that get this interesting profile that, to me, I can only describe as peanutty, like a little bit of a peanut flavor to them. And there's been 2 specific American single malts, and they've both been aged in virgin American oak that have given me that note. So I haven't had this for a little while. I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, it's funny, I think I got this bottle about a month ago. I remember diving right in and going, woo. Like, yeah, that I think they should call it Navy SEAL strength. It's
Yeah.
got a nice little oomph to it, but in a very approachable way, which is, for me being the whiskey noob, it's a very interesting whiskey because I'm like, you know, the oomph is similar to where you may be with tequila. The oomph, I'm still like that hit and that little burn. I'm still kind of like, like I don't know if I'm a huge fan of that. Like why, like I don't want my throat to burn as it going down, or just right on the palate. But right after, like immediately after that burn goes away, it is like the most peaceful. Like you just think like, you got Navy SEALs running through, and then they're got their whatever wind boats or whatever they're just hammering down on somebody, just like shooting guns, and then the nice calm waves after their boat is like that's the way I would look at this whiskey if I'm gonna tell a story. Like
Yeah.
you look at just like, and then just it's just nice and
Hmm.
soft after that. Like it's immediate though. It's immediate, pleasant, very approachable flavor after that initial kick, which is for me, I don't think I've had a whiskey like that so far.
Yeah, this definitely has a strong kick to it. And I will say, I totally agree with you that this has more of an oomph to it than you might be used to. And for those guys who have drank a lot of whiskey and a lot of single malts, the good news is sometimes single malts, especially to bourbon drinkers, can almost come across a little bit boring. They can come across a little bit too mellow and too easy. This has a little bit of that maltiness, but it has a punch with it that you don't get, especially I don't get from a lot of Scotch single malts, but I have been starting to get in this new American single malt category. So this has a pop to it. It's got a punch to it, and it's interacting very interestingly with this cigar. Luckily, I've had
Very.
the old line before I've had the cigar because I recognize this does not taste like old line tasted when I just had old line. This is interacting heavily with each other, I would say.
I would say so. I think just right off the bat here, I think this is 100% antagonistic. I think the old line is not getting changed here. I think it's, in my opinion, in this very early stages of this pairing, I think it's too strong for this cigar. I think it is knocking kind of it down a little bit. The only flavors that I'm really getting out of the cigar is the after the finish of what I'm getting from the whiskey. I think it's really getting muted here, in my opinion. That which I'm shocked about. I'm really surprised that that San Andreas is not playing a kind of putting up a better fight against it. But again, this is not a San Andreas Maduro. It's a San Andreas Sumatra and San Andreas all the way through. So I think maybe that approachableness that we were excited about and that made the tequila pairing really good
Hmm.
could be the downside of this one, and that it's not a big guy. It's not putting up a huge fight, and I think it's really kind of bowing down to this old line here.
I will agree with you for the most part. I'll only disagree with that. I do think the old line is changing a little bit. Aside from that, everything you said, I agree with. I think that the cigar doesn't have enough pop to it to go with the old line. The old line is such a big, bold whiskey. You almost need a big, bold cigar to go with it, or a cigar that's so versatile that it might not be bold, but it changes to kind of accommodate it. You're gonna remember, but I won't. The name of the one that was sweet tipped, and it was like very versatile.
New Cuba, yeah.
New Cuba, yes. And it was like everything that it went with, it kind of changed to go with it. It would almost need to be that way. Excellent cigar and excellent whiskey, just not made for each other, in my personal opinion.
Yep.
It almost brings out the burn of the old line a little bit more and dampens the flavor of the cigar a little bit. So
Yeah.
they're really good separately, but together they just don't quite play properly, I don't think.
Yeah, and then that's gonna happen, guys, when you have these, pairings when you're trying things, right? You're gonna like I am a huge fan of this cigar, and I'm pretty good fan of this whiskey, but just you're gonna find things that don't work together, and that's fine. That's why we're doing this right here, is that they're just not playing. Now, what I will say, when you come across, something like this, I think it's very important to just really notice why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like try and
Mm-hmm.
figure out the reasons why and try and figure out the reasons like, okay, like is it going to be the strength? And we're going to see that here in a second. Is it the strength that's not playing with this cigar? Is that why it's going away? So it's one of those things where I think it's going to happen. You're going to realize it, but you need to pay attention when it does. So, again, you can be educated when you move along. And overall, again, or also, I'm going to say this is a great example of something that is not a blanket statement that cigars and whiskey go well together. It is
Yes.
one of my pet peeves when people say, "Oh yeah, cigars and whiskey, it's the best pairing." And I'm like, "What cigar, what whiskey?"
Mm-hmm.
Because right now these two aren't playing. There's no play between these two. I agree there's probably a little something, and maybe if my whiskey palate was a little elevated, I could see it in the old line, but overall it's just killing the cigar, and that's just
Yep.
true, right? There's no play. The cigar may be playing with the whiskey a little bit, but there is no play with the whiskey into the cigar. It's just killing the whiskey's killing the cigar here. So it's killing that blanket statement of whiskey and cigars go together. Not true. Cigars are very different from each other. This cigar, if you smoke it, if you're part of the Perfect Pairing Club, you're going to see it. This is not just like every other cigar, and this whiskey is not just like every other whiskey. So that I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is not that we're helping it. Once this whole podcast is kind of around eliminating that like whole stigma of whiskey is the only good pairing with cigars. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
already busted that myth with the tequila today, but also all whiskey and cigars go together. Busted here too.
Yep, absolutely. I think the other thing about that is you almost learn more from the pairings that don't work than you do from the pairings that do work, because it's a lot easier to see why something doesn't work than it is to see why it does work. If you've been listening since the beginning, there's been so many pairings that we're just like, this works great, this is amazing. Well, you don't really know why, you just know that it does. Whereas, like you mentioned, if you pay attention to why it doesn't work, if you want to learn to pair cigars and whiskey, first of all, listen along and try the cigar as we're trying these pairings. But when you do that, try the whiskey first, especially if you've never had it before, the whiskey or the tequila or whatever we're pairing, and get an idea for what it tastes like, and then move to the cigar. Because then what you can do is, if the pairing doesn't work, you can set down the whiskey, rinse out with some water, and just smoke the cigar. Now you know what the whiskey tastes like, you know what the cigar tastes like, and you know what they taste like together. And that's going to help you see why they don't work. Like Adam said, we're about to move on to another high proof whiskey that has a totally different flavor profile. And that's going to give us some information on why it didn't work with the old line. Because once again, both fantastic separately. They just don't work with each other properly.
It happens. This next one I am super excited about, but I think you may be even more excited. So I don't even think I can do any justice introducing it.
Yeah, I'm definitely extremely excited. So this next pairing is Barrel Seagrass. And if you are seeing my bottle right now, if you're watching the video version, you can see that I love Barrel Seagrass. This is a finished rye whiskey. So Barrel Craft Spirits, what they do is they take a rye whiskey, they finish it in Martinique rum, Madeira, and apricot brandy barrels, and they blend those. And this is one of those whiskeys that I tried, and it immediately was in my top 10. As soon as I tried it, I was like, this is phenomenal for my palate. This is unique. Some people don't actually like it depending on your flavor preferences, but I will say most of the people that I've introduced to it like it because it's not the standard rye overbearing spiciness. It brings you the nice rye spice, but it mellows it out with those finishes. And I can't say any more good about it. I absolutely love Barrel Seagrass. If you've been following my content for a while, you know that I do. This is not an advertisement. This is nothing like that. This is just one of my favorite whiskeys. And I'm excited because the cigar with the tequila gave us summer vibes. Barrel Seagrass gives me summer vibes. I did a video last year saying that this is one of my favorite summertime whiskeys because it's bright and it's fruity and it's strong, so you got to be careful, but you can put it on ice in the summertime because it's so strong. And so I'm really interested to see how they interact with each other.
So I've been playing along here with these two. I I'm very, very, very pleased to announce that this is playing. They are playing together. They're having a good time. They're on the beach and they're in Cancun and just letting living life. But here's what I'm gonna say immediately. What this barrel seagrass is doing to this cigar, it is bringing, strangely enough, it is bringing that Sumatra out of this cigar. That's the only part of this cigar that is not San Andreas, but it is coming out, and I think that's we're going to talk about it. We've got a cigar coming up that's got some Sumatra play in it as well. They've got this spice going on. The Sumatra wrapper always has this kind of complex spice going on, and that is what is coming out of this cigar for me. You get that natural San Andreas flavor, that kind of salivation that we've talked about, but the overall flavor profile of the cigar, I think, tends towards more of that Sumatra side than the San Andreas side, but it is definitely not getting muted. Then when I go back to the whiskey, I think that whiskey is like, cool. You wanna play Sumatra? Let's play Sumatra, but I'm gonna bring out a little bit of that San Andreas side of you, and I'm gonna have a little sweetness on it. I'm gonna have that natural San Andreas kind of chocolatey flavor almost come out, and I'm playing with you as well. I think they're happy to be there. They're hanging out in Cancun. They're on vacation, and they're in the summertime. I 100% agree with you. I think this pairing is exactly what you wanted it to be.
Yeah, it is. I'm really excited about this because I love barrel seagrass so much. Yeah, I want to try this pairing with the seagrass on ice actually, because I have a theory that this or the tequila, because you could put the tequila on ice too, they're both just summertime pairings, dude. They're fruity, they're interacting with each other, they're light. The San Andreas, like you said, it almost gets that Sumatra flavor. It almost gets like a little spicy, a little dark, a little interesting. Mm-hmm. And then the barrel seagrass is like the fruit is still there. The rye spice is there just enough. It's not as much as normal, but just enough that they're just interacting super, super nicely with each other. I can already say definitively this is going to be a hard one for me to rank 100%.
Yeah, I will say now, like right when you mentioned the rye, I was like, we talked about you always learn from the ones that don't work. Trying to learn from this one that is working really well. I think what may be going on is the rye is playing with that Sumatra, the spice mm-hmm. and the spice. I think there's a little bit of that play. I think that's why the Sumatra is coming out heavy on the cigar. So, again, trying to learn. If you can learn from your wins, then you're golden, right? So mm-hmm. I think that's maybe what's happening here, is that rye is bringing out the Sumatra. I will have to experiment more with some Sumatra. Like what I really want to do is I want to find, go grab a cigar that has a pure Sumatra wrapper, and mm-hmm. and really say like, and pair it with this seagrass and then some other ryes and be like, okay, yep, like this is what we're trying to do here, guys, is really trying to help you find definitive statements, because mm-hmm. pairings can be so complex because there's so many different cigars, so many different pairings you can do with them. We're trying to help you find some definitive statements, and if we can say rye and Sumatra play, then you are automatically, you have that tool in your tool belt when you go to a cigar lounge, and you could be whiskey first or you could be cigar first like I am. It doesn't matter. At least one of those, like if you're a Sumatra lover or you grabbed a Sumatra wrapper that day, boom, I'm going to go grab a rye. Mm-hmm. Like trying to find those absolute truths, if you will, of the pairing world. We're trying to demystify the pairing world and help you have some tools in your tool belt to go have a great time when you're going to a cigar lounge or just at your house having a whiskey and a cigar.
Yeah, and I think another thing I'll notice, and I'll try to pick this up from the failure side of things, is I think this cigar would not go great with anything overly oaky. I think that extreme oakiness kind of brought out a weird harshness that made it a weird pairing, because the seagrass is not very oaky. Obviously, the silver tequila is not oaky. And I think too much oakiness doesn't play well with this, but your light, summery flavors play really nicely with it. Anything that you think, I could probably drink this on like a hot day if I had some ice in it, I think that's going to play very well with a cigar.
100%. The challenge here, and I didn't plan on it, but I am gonna have to go ahead and pour some more tequila because I was just sipping. I was just trying to go back and, move the episode along. But you're on the same boat. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
same boat.
It's apples and oranges here with this seagrass and with this tequila on deciding which one is number one. Unfortunately, we're gonna come across these with the experiments that we're doing. That the old line is just. We can go ahead and say it. It's going to land at number 3 in both of our rankings here.
Yeah.
The rating is what it is, but overall, guys, Chris, I don't want to speak for you, but just don't have the old line and don't with the Cuchillo Parado. Like it's just not it's not working. If you want to experience why, if you want to just experiment, go ahead and try it, but have another pairing ready because you're going to be disappointed like we were. We both loved the old line. We both loved the cigar. It just didn't work. It's going to land at number 3. But this tequila in this barrel, it's apples and oranges. Like, what are you in the mood for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I think I'm going to bring the old line back. Since I like you said before, I put together the pairings. I think the old line, I have a theory, it's going to work really well with a darker wrapper. Something like a Corojo that has like a sweetness and I really think something with a leather note and a dark chocolate is going to go nicely with that old line. That's my theory. We'll have to try it. I don't really know for sure.
The cigar that comes to mind that we've had thus far is the GTO La Cura.
That was exactly what I was thinking of. Yep.
Yeah. If you guys are in the Perfect Pairing Club, or have been, I guess, for the past 3 months, I think that was 2 months ago. You had the GTO La Cura, and I think that would be a great pairing with this old line. I have a couple left, so I may have to go ahead and give that one a try. If you're looking for the GTO La Cura, it's mostly in the southeast, so you may not be able to find it if you're not in the southeast. But definitely what I'll recommend to anybody out there as just a general statement to give Chris some more time in his pairings.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, is if you ever come across a cigar in a subscription pack, if you're in the Perfect Pairing Club, great. Thank you. Continue to do it. I think we have a great thing going. Obviously, personally, we like it, and we think it's a great product. But if you're in any club or anything like that, or a friend gives you a cigar that you do not have or cannot find locally, go to your local shop and tell them, I like this cigar. That's how cigar brands grow. That's what happens is, you find things like this media out there, or maybe the brand, or maybe it's a gift, whatever it is, and you're like, man, I've never seen that cigar before. Casa 1910 is a great example. I know they're national and global, but it's a newer brand. I believe they're 3 or 4 years old. With that Mexican play, it's growing tremendously. I think Mexican imports in the U.S. in 2024 were up 30% from last year. So you're looking at a giant increase in Mexican cigars being imported in the U.S. Go to your local tobacconist, go to your local shop and be like, I want this cigar. Then they're going to start buying it. You'll see it more locally, stuff like that. So that's just, support small businesses, support the brands that you love. So I'm sure it's the same thing in the liquor whiskey world.
Yeah, that's a really great point, actually, especially it really depends on your state, but like Ohio's a controlled state, but when they see a spike in interest for anything, at least in very recent years, they've been really good at getting those liquors. So on the liquor side as well, I think that's a really great point, as to try to make some movements to get the ones that you want, if that's what you're looking for. I do have my rankings done, and we might disagree on these rankings. And if we do, that's okay, because I know for a fact I'm going to be extraordinarily biased in my rankings. But I will say, this is a ranking where if I could have done a tie, I would have done a tie. And I feel like everybody listening knows exactly what I'm going to say, just based on that preface. I have Old Line in third. I have Tequila Ocho second. by a razor thin margin. And then I put barrel seagrass first because specifically on the cigar, I felt like I noticed more of a perfumey flavor or I don't even know how to describe it other than like a bright flavor in it with the seagrass than I did with the tequila ocho. Whereas with the tequila, I noticed very similar flavors. It just didn't have this weird kind of bright pop that it got from the barrel seagrass. That's just my opinion. Once again, I'm probably pretty biased.
No, that's fair. It's difficult on the tequila end because what I'm looking at is I'm almost putting it in its own category. Like
hmm
I am really enjoying this pairing, but I wish I had the añejo of this tequila ocho,
hmm
and I think it would be different. And it's difficult. Like it's a good pairing, but I'm also like I know there's some tequilas specifically that would be probably better. So
hmm
it's like, where do I put that? And like, it's almost like we gotta have categories. Like you can go, we've talked about it. It's so complex, these pairings. Um, but I am gonna go. Man, this is tough. This is really tough. But I'm gonna go the tequila ocho number one. The
Okay.
reason being at number one is because I think once I hit the old line and once I hit the barrel and I went back to the tequila ocho, it wasn't what I experienced first, but I think it's because of the hit that my palate took from the old line and the barrel. Like
Okay.
I think that's why it was so different because in the beginning they
hmm
played beautifully. In the end, the tequila ocho seemed more muted than the first
hmm
time, and I feel like that's because my palate is really heavily hit. So I'm going off of the initial reactions of all three. I got tequila ocho first. I got the barrel seagrass second. I got the old line third. Now, here's where it's the more difficult part on the rating side. I'm gonna go ahead and start at the bottom, and we can go back and forth here
hmm
because I'm intrigued to see your old line here as well. My old line here with this pairing specifically, it's not the old line rating. You guys got to remember that it's not an old line rating, and it's not the Cuchillo Parado rating. This is the pairing rating. I'm at five flat.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
at
No, I'm
five
right.
flat. Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
actually at 4.9, so I'm right with you. It was just below where I would recommend it as a pairing. And once again, it doesn't fall in the old line. I think the old line is going to go beautifully with a darker cigar. So I'm going to keep that in mind and we're going to have this again. I'll say it right away. I want to try it with a darker cigar because I want to know what happens because we haven't had something with that flavor profile yet with a darker cigar. So we'll be trying that. But yeah, I put it at 4.9. And then to jump to the next one, so I I had tequila ocho as next. I'm interested to see what you put. So I put 8.3 for my tequila ocho.
Okay. It's funny because it's really close. I had 8.6.
Okay. Okay.
I had 8.6 on the Tequila Ocho. Again, leaving room for. I know there's a gap between the this pairing and some tequilas specifically. It's really like and that's why like it. I don't know. I feel super conflicted right now between the ratings because I'm like, like if we were just going on whiskeys, the barrel seagrass maybe here, and then it's like it's a complex scenario because I'm like I
hmm
know the tequila ocho was great, but there's also some things. So you guys will see here, and I'll just go ahead and say my barrel seagrass was 8.5.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That,
I'm
I'm.
right there, and I almost think that should be higher. It's just it's a difficult play.
Yep. I'm right there with you. I put 8.4. Because to me they were just so on top of each other. Because I put 8.3 for the tequila ocho, I had to put 8.4 for the barrel. Like they were. If the tequila ocho could have been 8.39, that's probably what I would have done.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I feel like puts the seagrass over the edge for me is that it's so strong, and these are both summer pairings, that I could put it on ice and let it get watered down a little bit, and I'd still really enjoy it. But I'm right with you where they're so different that it's really hard to pick a favorite because it's just like two totally different experiences that are both really good.
Yeah, I'll just say it again. It's apples and oranges. Like it just
Yeah.
depends on what you're feeling,
what you're in the mood for, or who you are. Are you a tequila
Yeah.
guy? Or are you a whiskey guy? And I think we showed that. Like, I'm a tequila guy first, and then whiskey second. So I picked the tequila, and you're the opposite. So I think, again, it's one of those scenarios where guys, both of these, the tequila ocho plata and the barrel seagrass, try it. You're gonna
Yep.
like it. You're gonna love it. You may have it in the 9 range. It's both of them are great.
Yeah, and for all of our whiskey drinkers listening who are like, ooh, tequila, I don't know. This is a great scenario to try a tequila with because that made that tequila ocho, especially for me who's not very experienced in tequila, it made it taste so much more approachable and fruity for me. I really enjoyed that. So if you're new to tequila like I am, I know very, very little about tequila. That makes it really enjoyable. And maybe it's just to play with the cigar, but it gives it a real nice flavor. So I would recommend that as well.
I'm with you on that. That's a great point. I think that tequila is way more approachable. It's way easier to get into. So if you aren't a tequila guy, 100%, this is a good pairing for you. Now for the
Hmm.
trivia answer for you guys, I nearly like I was so close so many different times in this podcast that I'm revealing the answer because it had so much to do with this pairing trifecta here. But the answer is, or the question is, sorry, what part of the cigar, the binder, wrapper, or the filler, has to do the most with the flavor? And it is typically the wrapper. So
Hmm.
that's why I think the barrel seagrass brought out that Sumatra, because the Sumatra is a heavy play in this part of the cigar here, being a San Andreas Sumatra wrapper. So that is the answer of the trivia question this week. The caveat is a lot of blenders, like Chris said, are getting really creative here in the cigar world. They are able to blend a cigar so specifically to where the king of the flavor is actually the filler, which is typically where the strength comes from. That's where I'm actually not going to say the name. I'm going to save this for a trivia question. But where a certain type of tobacco, which you guys are going to have to tune in later to find out what it is, but a certain type of tobacco is usually used to give a little bit of more oomph in the cigar,
Oh.
in the filler. So that's where it gets its body. The flavor is usually from the wrapper and the binder a little bit. So that's the trivia answer for the week.
Okay, I don't know the next one, so I'm excited to get to that one now. So I'm excited to learn about that.
Nice. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you weren't able to get this cigar, make sure you go to shopdreamercigars.com. You sign up for the Perfect Pairing Club where you can smoke these cigars. It's a monthly subscription, only $30. Obviously, with the code PPP10, as we've always mentioned, you guys get 10% off every single month just for listening. But you guys will be able to smoke these cigars and try them with whatever pairings you have at home. Please sign up for that subscription so you guys can experiment with us. Tell us in the Discord what you guys are loving, what you guys are not loving, and what cigars and whiskeys you want to see in the future. So thank you so much for tuning in. Chris, this was a mighty interesting one. I'm actually going to go ahead and grab this old line and experiment with another cigar here because I'm at the end on this one. And we're going to find a good one in the future. But cheers.
Cheers.